I'm here with Don Jackson, and he's the author of 3 books for University Press of Mississippi. The newest, Deeper Currents, The Sacraments of Hunting and Fishing, Wilder Ways, and Tracks. Don, thanks for coming in and sitting down with us.
My pleasure, Steve.
Great. Now, you've been running all around the state today. You've gone to Vicksburg
I have been.
and here in Jackson. You'll be at Lemuria later today. Where else have you signed Deeper Currents here in Mississippi?
At a library group up in Tupelo hosted me for one of their luncheons, their monthly events, and that was sponsored by Reed's Bookstore up in
Right
Tupelo.
on, yeah.
And then I had another event at the bookstore downtown in Starkville.
Oh, good. The bookmark. Okay,
Yes.
And then now we've brought the message down here to Jackson. I wanted to talk to you about message because it's been really a pleasure to watch these 3 books and really watch what you're doing in these 3 books. This book contains an essay called Deeper Currents.
That's true.
And then in this book, more than once, Deep Currents or Deeper Currents comes up in an essay.
Right.
And now you've titled the book
Yeah.
Deeper Currents. What does that phrase mean to you? You've used it several times.
Exactly. I think that a lot of times when people think about outdoor activities, they're more focused on just the nuts and bolts of getting out there and doing things.
Okay.
And if they're in the realm of hunting and fishing, there's a lot of attention focused on equipment and techniques and the actual logistics of carrying on whatever activity it may well be. Setting up decoys for duck hunting, for example.
Right.
Or ways of tying on hooks for different types of fishing activities.
Right, getting the deer stand in the right place.
Put the deer stand in the right place,
Yeah.
and so forth like that. And all of that is very important. That's a framework for getting things underway.
Okay.
But there are other reasons for us being out there.
Okay.
And so I explore those other reasons. I can't help but have a sense of spiritual connectedness to the activity and to the place and to the process, and to the point where sometimes I think perhaps I'm a mystic.
You're a mystic, yeah.
Because it's like I'm hearing voices out there, but it's not really
A Presbyterian mystic.
Perhaps I'm not. I don't think I'm going quite insane, but you know, I do engage, and it's important to me to open myself up to that engagement, to try to understand why it is that we're out there, what it is about being outdoors, and primarily in my case fishing and hunting, but also I engage in hiking and canoeing, and I work a lot with the Boy Scouts and things of this sort. And you know, why? What are the big reason, the meaning of being out there? You know, it's beyond just the activity and the knowledge and the understanding of how to go about these things, but why? What is the meaning of it?
I want to ask you too how, you know, since you were trying to, especially with this book, but very often when you carry that a larger message forward, you do something really remarkable in your essays, in that we're reading along and we're very much in the moment about what's going to happen. Maybe you're trying for that 32 ounce bluegill for the first time or something like that. But no, things are very, very concrete.
Yeah.
And there is that tension of, will he achieve what he's been talking about, or will he get through this canoe in high tide and get his friends back to the cabin? But then so very quickly you're able to bring in just a couple of phrases about that larger meaning. Where did you learn how to do that writing part of it? Because that's very difficult. In other words, I'm meaning, you know, you'll have 2 or 3 pages of just intense hunting description or intense outdoor description, and then you'll have that quick turn of phrase, 2 or 3 sentences, and suddenly everything gets so much bigger.
Well, let me ask you a question about that before I attempt an answer.
Okay.
Because I've got to have some time to internalize what you're asking me to do here. But do you think that creates an uncomfortable situation for a reader?
Oh, no. That's how you want to do it, because you don't want you don't want 2 pages of maundering or of spirit searching. You want just the balance you have.
Well,
I think it's just
I'm not sure. Well, I'm not sure that I was taught or learned that.
Okay.
I think it's kind of the way I am. I mean, I look at things, I experience things, I engage a world around me, and in that engagement, then at certain points there are, for lack of a better word, epiphanies, awareness, realization,
Okay.
That there's something else going on here that I need to pay attention to.
Okay.
And if I can somehow put that in a creative way, and through my writing, hopefully somebody that's reading this book will take my hand.
Right.
And we share that journey, but even more so, we share that transition, and that then becomes really what the writing is about, is that shared experience, to be able to come together synergistically, a writer and a reader come together synergistically and share that journey, share that sojourn in ways that are meaningful, in ways that are powerful, hopefully that provide both of us, because my writing is something that also draws me into something else, another dimension of our experience. But we gain something that will be like a compass to help us orient in the future.
Oh, good. Yeah. Okay. I want to talk to you about another sharing experience. This is going to take you all the way back to tracks.
Okay, that's the 2006.
Yeah.
That's been
Does
10
it
years
seem that
ago.
long ago?
It has been.
Yeah. Well,
I'm obviously a prolific writer. I book every 10 years.
I'm saying we've got 3 good ones here. We've got 3 good ones here.
Yeah.
What I'm thinking about is that moment in the essay, deeper currents, and you and your son have been fishing, and you then, and I had no idea that this was, in a way, what the essay was going to be about. At first I was swept up into all the details of, you're in the Ozarks, right? You're in on the White River, and in Arkansas, and at the end of it, he's looking out the window, and you know what's in his mind, and you stop because you don't want to interrupt him at all. You want to keep him in that moment where he is. Now, what I wanted to ask, longish way to a question, you got to work with your son on this book.
Different son.
Different son. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes, the one that I was writing about in Tracks.
Okay.
On the fishing excursion is my younger son, who's an Air Force pilot now. He just returned from deployment over in Syria and Iraq.
Oh, wow.
So he's a bomber pilot.
Okay. Well, somehow I had conflated the two.
And then my older son is the artist.
Right, and so he illustrated.
He did the work for Wilder Ways.
Yeah.
That's correct. And he's a landscape architect now.
Beautiful. Well, what about sharing with those sons? I mean, you've now got, not only have you shared the outdoors, but with Robert, you've shared the experience of creating a book. I mean, this book is what it is because of the whole package.
Absolutely.
And those beautiful illustrations he did.
I have been fortunate to have 3 wonderful children. All of them are, I can say, engaged in those deeper currents that we talk about. They are all deep of faith. They're all committed to excellence. They do not make peace with mediocrity. They are courageous, and they like to go out adventuring. They will spend a long time alone in wild places at this point. All three of them. My youngest is 21, my oldest is 29, and they all have had their experiences alone in wild places and are very comfortable there. And they are all people of deep faith that look beyond just what is around them, and they try to do as we have experienced together as a father with a son or a daughter. They have all linked in with something that is bigger than just what it seems to be there.
Great.
And that has been a gift to me, because there are echoes then that will reverberate after I'm long gone. Hopefully,
yeah.
you know, that this is a way of engaging the world that is going to be enduring.
Well, and they may be telling you the story of teaching a grandson one day, right?
I would hope.
You wait for that story. Let me ask you about
Or granddaughter.
Or granddaughter, indeed. Let me ask you about this. It always impresses me how many different lengths of essays that you can deploy in these books. Sometimes an essay will be, 16, 17 pages, and sometimes in 3 pages you get some wondrous things done. And I wondered if, as you start one of these pieces, do you know for sure, okay, this is going to be a long one, I'm going to sit down with this for a while? Do you know, or do you just let things happen and discover?
I have titles. I write them down as they come to me, and I sit down when I'm ready to write, and I do try to write frequently. I try to write every day, but I'm not always successful. But I sit down with a title in mind. Quite often, after just a few minutes with that title, it morphs into something completely different.
Really?
And the theme that I thought that was going to develop becomes different. It transitioned as I write. I begin to recognize that there is something else there, and I typically will write one of these essays, chapters, in a day.
Mm-hmm.
It takes me 1 day to do it, and then I set them aside for 3 or 4 days, and I come back and I spend another day or 2 with them, and I leave it alone for a week. I come back, make what I consider to be my final changes, and I leave it alone at that point, because I think you can overwork a piece, and I don't want to do that. Now, when I say leave it alone, I'm not talking about going back in and making sure that grammar and syntax and punctuation and so forth like that are correct, because there are going to always be some issues there. I mean, even after a book is published, you're going to find some things, even with the very best copywriters out there and everybody looking at it, you're going to still have something.
It is a human endeavor.
It absolutely is, but the theme, the purpose, the power, the current, those deeper currents that we're talking about, you mess with them too much, and then they become mechanical.
Yeah.
And you lose the spirit of the thing. At least for me, it seems that way.
Now, I wanted to ask another question about your writing process. You write about things in this book which came from way at the beginning of your life. There's the squirrel hunting when you're in seminary school, and I thought, well, my goodness, that's a piece of Don's life from a long, long time ago, and it seems so very, very fresh in this book. And I wondered if the chronology of your life, if something gets sharper toward in these years, even when it's distant in years. You see what I mean?
I do.
'Cause that's
see
a
what- I
really
do-
sharp essay.
I do know what you mean, and it's very rare that I write about recent events. I think it takes time it's like a stew that's got to bubble and simmer for a while.
Okay.
For it to get some power inside of it, for me to develop a sense of purpose with an event or with a place or something. For example, I'm working on a story in my mind right now about hunting hooters. Hooters.
Okay.
Hooters that's the vernacular name for a dusky grouse that lives in southeast Alaska.
Oh, wow, okay.
And it's like a backwards turkey hunt, where the bird stays put and you try to find it, and the bird is extremely difficult to find, but it will not move. It stays up at the top of a tree and hoo, 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 hoo.
Really?
And you are crawling through some of the gosh awfulest terrain imaginable. And last year I did that with a former student of mine, Mark Stofa, who lives in southeast Alaska. He was a student at Mississippi State University with me, but he came to me from Alaska. I was at the University of Alaska when he was an undergraduate, and I helped him get into the Peace Corps. We've maintained a relationship for 30 years.
Okay.
And we hunted together. I was 64, and he was 50-something, and these two men, sort of elderly men that should have known better, were crawling around in the southeast Alaska jungle chasing these birds. And they're big. They're like a big Rhode Island red chicken.
Oh,
and when you
cow.
shoot one and it hits the ground, the earth trembles. I mean, they're big birds, but they're extremely difficult to see in the trees. Well, anyway, that story is working in my head right now, and that happened last year, and it may be another several months before I actually sit down and actually write the story of what that was all about. For these two gray-bearded men to be crawling around on slippery rocks and through the bogs and the marshes and the creeks and so forth, and there's still snow on the ground, and we're out there with a couple of old beat-up shotguns that we're using as walking sticks trying to get up the side of the mountain. I'm not sure exactly what all that means yet, Steve.
But you'll get to it.
But it'll be in the next book. I can tell you about that.
Let's talk about places then for the viewers, because these books do some extraordinary traveling for the armchair naturalist. You're going to go really far, because there are Mississippi stories in here, there are Arkansas stories in here. What other southern states do we visit in these three books?
Well,
Tennessee?
No.
Okay.
Louisiana, the coast of Louisiana.
Okay. Texas.
There's a bass fishing story.
Okay.
Over in
And
Texas.
then there's a lot of really incredible Alaska stuff. Some of that is my favorite in the books. They always, like the grouse story you were telling right there, but the one about that cabin at Saskatoon?
No, Stickeen.
Stickeen? Okay. Yeah. That cabin, what an extraordinary setting that is.
It was absolutely extraordinary.
And was that the same Mark that you're
Yes.
talking about? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And this cabin that you're talking about was an old Forest Service cabin that was sitting out in the middle of a tidal flat.
Wow.
And it was perched on logs that were bigger around than I am tall.
Was it on pilings?
No, the logs are just sitting flat.
Wow.
There, and this cabin is built on them. It would be like if you were building a raft that isn't a raft. Those logs are so big that they form a foundation, and they're big enough that they can handle the tidal ebb and flow out there. And it's like something out of The Hobbit, or
it really read that way too. I mean, you were just so surrounded by the sea,
completely surrounded by this tidal flat with mud and marsh and river flow, and everything is there, including more ducks than you can possibly imagine.
Yeah, the number of ducks, and then I didn't even know that you could eat crane.
Oh, that's the
Or
beef.
that you could hunt them.
Oh, well, these are not the whooping crane, the endangered one. These are sandhill cranes.
Okay.
Now in Mississippi we have sandhill cranes,
Yes.
but ours are protected. It's
Okay.
a different. It's the Mississippi sandhill crane.
Okay.
I think that's the proper name for them. But
Okay.
the ones that are hunted in Alaska are the same ones that are hunted in West Texas and then the
Okay.
Platte River in Nebraska and so forth up there.
Alright.
So, yes, that's the beefsteak
Of waterfowl.
Of the waterfowl. If you want to call it a waterfowl, they're cranes. They have feet like a chicken. They're not webbed like a duck.
Really, really?
Long pointed beaks and
Wow.
they're big and that they.
Well, that's what it sounded like when you were shooting one. When it came down on the porch, I thought,
Yeah, well,
gosh,
the
wow.
only I've heard it said that the only thing that can make shooting a crane better was if when you shot them, they would catch on fire as they came down. But I don't like that image since I've got a son that's a bomber pilot.
Well, there's that, and it would also sort of make the cleaning of them might be more
Yeah, they
complicated.
might be already
you know.
pre-cooked by the time.
That's right. That's right.
But no, it was fabulous to be able to engage those cranes out there.
Yeah. And then what other places do the essays take us to? It takes us overseas in a couple of them.
Right, Southeast Asia.
Yes.
I spent 2 years in the Peace Corps right at the very end of the Vietnam War. In fact, I was there when the war was still going on in Cambodia, and there were boat people streaming out of Vietnam into Malaysia, and I was there when they would come on the beaches. I was part of some of that. Well, that wasn't my official job in the Peace Corps. I was a university professor in the Peace Corps. But that's over there to Malaysia. Let's see. I'm trying to think. There's at least a couple about Malaysia. I have one about fishing for tarpon down in Puerto Rico.
Okay. Okay.
And gosh, I'd have to look at the chapters to
Sure.
remember.
Well, that's okay. We've given people a good idea that these travel. And now I want to ask you one last question.
Okay.
There's a wonderful essay about river. It's not called river counting, but I think it's called river current. In this, the river song in this now. And I want to ask you this. In that river song essay, you talk about a movie in which, go ahead, give it a flip.
Okay.
You talk about a movie that you became obsessed with as a lad, in which there were river people
Absolutely.
in their houseboats who were so connected with their environment that that's what they did. And
That was their life.
That was their life. And I wondered, now that you're retired from Mississippi State University, have you achieved some of those moments that you dreamed about as a lad, where you're really, really living the river, so to speak?
I spent my career primarily on the rivers here in Mississippi. That's what I did.
Yeah.
I was a river fisheries biologist. I did some other things too. I worked a little bit with farm ponds and some coastal zone research and so forth. But the thing that was the central focus of my career was looking at river fisheries comprehensively, not just the fish and the environment, but the way people interact with that. And there are people that are directly dependent upon those rivers. We may not want to think about that too much. It can be a big challenge to our society if we really think about people that are living so close to the earth, to the woods and the land and the waters that are right there where they are. And the reality is that those resources, the woods, the land, the water, the wildlife, the fish, the forests and so forth, they're non-transportable resources.
Non-transportable, yeah.
And if those are degraded, if those resources are degraded, the people that depend on them have no choice. They can't just pick up and move. They have to deal with the reality of the situation that's there around them, for better or worse. And so I spent a lot of time on the river. I wouldn't say that I'm much of a scientist. I know how to do a little bit of science. I'm more of a poet naturalist. I do this kind of stuff. But I did conduct a lot of doctoral and master's level research, and most of that was with rivers here in Mississippi. And I did connect with them. I connected very deeply with not only just the place, but with the people. I can speak that language. I know the people that are down there running their nets and their lines, and I know what they're doing with those fish. And if they didn't have those fish in those rivers, things wouldn't be very good for them. And so when I'm out there, I not only hear the river's song, but I hear their songs, the songs of the people that won't really say much out in the biopolitical world. They keep to themselves, and they depend on other people who may understand what they're about. They depend on them to be their voice. And I felt a very strong sense of responsibility, Steve, to sometimes step out into the arenas where angels may fear to tread, to try to be that voice for the people that are connected to those rivers, because I don't see that there is a choice. I think that if we are respectful to the diversity of life, including the diversity of human life that exists in our society, then we have to be sure that we take care of the total picture of the way they live and what their value systems are. I don't want to see people that live on the river be considered as an endangered species. I think that we lose something in our society when we lose the river people.
Well, Don, this has just been so great talking with you. I've been talking with Don Jackson, and he's the author of 3 books with University Press in Mississippi, the most recent being Deeper Currents, Wilder Ways, and the first one he published with his Tracks. Thanks, Don.
Well, thank you, Steve. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.